Probation is usually given for a felony. A felony is a crime typically involving violence regarded as more serious than a misdemeanor, and not murder. But in this case, the judge gives the defendant probation for murder. In this edition of Probation for Murder, we discuss the murder case of Scott Rhodes by his wife Tracy Rhodes, who was said to be his high school sweetheart and that eventually he married in 1990. And both Rhodes were college educated, and Scott's college experience led him to become an engineer. Tracy would use her education to become a nurse, specializing in labor and delivery of babies. So we're talking about two college educated people. Got somebody at the bottom. Now, in other words, Tracy would participate in bringing life to the world and taking from the world after work. Bringing life at job, at your house, you're taking life. I say again, what I find ironic in many of these spouse murder cases is that it is the nurses that end up killing their husbands more than other career women. I mean, how can you promise to keep people in a state of wellness at work, then come home and destroy that same wellness in a living human being? Even in the case of serial killers, a 2006 study examining 90 cases of healthcare serial killers from 20 different countries between the years 1970 and 2006 found that 86% of those who became serial killers within healthcare were nurses. Wow, nurses. Nurses so far have been the highest killers in this particular profession. By the time Tracy's case would come to trial, she would have prepared a ruse that is reminiscent of most wives who have killed their husbands in cold blood, and that is to besmirch their characters vigorously to save themselves. Tear the guy down, say he was the worst person in the world. Now Tracy would attempt to convince anyone who would listen, including the jury, that her husband Scott was an abusive, controlling, and manipulative husband who didn't trust her one bit. This guy was everything short of leaving the toilet seat up after pissing on it. She said that up until his death, Scott accused her of having affairs with other men. Now, but if you have researched as many of these cases as I have, you would know that lawyers and judges hear the same untruths all year long when it comes to people who've murdered their own spouses. Those people are going to try to get out of that situation as much as they can. They try to plan it before they even kill them. But they can never get past the law because it's been there for hundreds of years. Oddly enough, what will come to light at her trial was that Scott had been right all along. Tracy was having an affair with another man just as surely as she killed her husband in cold blood, and not in self-defense as she would later on claim. And in all of these cases, the ladies always try to pretend that they killed their husband in self-defense. At the hospital where Tracy was working as a labor and delivery nurse, she began having an affair with Shawn Michaels. Now, Shawn Michaels was a unit secretary at the hospital. After a time of flirting with Scott, their relationship led to a parking lot encounter where they kissed one another. And it was speculated that they went further than that, but that's all she said had happened. So the great portion of the story is on her say-so, not his. Now, but they did not stop there. That blossoming adulterous affair would not be brought to a screeching halt until the morning of October 15, 2003. What follows is what Tracy told the police concerning her husband's death. It is usually here that I inform the viewers that everything a spouse killer says is a one-sided truth. The other spouse is no longer here with us to tell you their version of the events. And that's convenient. On that particular Wednesday morning, Tracy said that she woke up early and went for a walk before coming back home and showering. Now, this was said to be her normal routine. As Tracy prepared to get out of the shower, she said she heard a distressful moaning sound coming from the bedroom, most likely coming from her husband. She says she entered her room from the bathroom she saw on the bed before her husband Scott moaning in some sort of agonizing pain. I wonder why. Upon closer inspection, Tracy said she noticed that Scott had blood on him and that she believed he had shot himself in an attempt to cause self-harm. So Tracy believed that her husband had just tried to commit suicide. It was then that Tracy said she called the police to inform them of what Scott had done, but not before she called her job to tell them that she was going to be late for work. Now, what Tracy neglected to tell 911 operator was that it was she that had shot Scott in an attempt to kill him. It was this woman who did it. Not that he had tried to kill himself. Like I said, I've done so many of these cases, and they all sound the same. Tracy wanted Scott out of her life, a new man in her life, and have her children free and clear without sharing custody. At that particular time, the couple was in a custody battle. When police officers arrived on the scene, they asked Tracy why she did not attempt to perform CPR on her husband, since she was a licensed nurse, and she did not even attempt to do it. Tracy's only response was that she was in shock, which is odd for a woman who would see injuries even worse on patients 5 days a week. Now, I've been in combat and I've seen some grotesque injuries, but nurses see this also, just like doctors. This shallow statement was the first red flag for the police. After this, police would ask Tracy if she would come downtown for a statement of events on record. They always want to get you into that interview room because there's cameras in the ceiling and microphones, but she didn't want that. Tracy said she was shocked when the police asked her to go to the station. She claimed she had already told them everything since she knew and had nothing else of value to add. She asked to go and be with her husband at the hospital because she knew he was dying. If you didn't give him CPR and you didn't check his condition, how do you know he's dying? But to this, police officers kept delaying her exit. Now, I imagine any seasoned officer would do this to protect the life of a person who was just shot by a loved one. They knew it, but she didn't know that they knew it. Unfortunately, by mid-afternoon the same day, Scott was declared brain dead, and before long, he was completely dead. It was then that the case went from an attempted suicide to a possible homicide. The cops again questioned why Tracy, as a first responder, issued absolutely no first aid to her dying husband. Why? Why would that be? Somebody he'd been married to for many years and had children by. And Tracy lashed out asking what she should have done. What was she expected to do, she said. She said he was still breathing when she found him. So it's not like she could give him CPR, because you cannot give CPR to somebody who is still conscious. Officers told her she should have at least compressed his wound while waiting for the ambulance to arrive. She didn't even put a bandage on the wound, and she's a nurse. No pressure.
You're watching MNN, the Men's Channel.
Tracy again stuck to what she had said before, that she was in shock. The cops, however, found it quite suspicious that she was too shocked to aid her dying husband, but was of sound body and mind to call into work as her first phone call to tell them that she wouldn't make her shift. Now, that's a pretty good worker when you can make sure that somebody covers your shift, but not that somebody covers your husband who's just been shot and who's on the way to the hospital. Now, the cops then questioned Tracy about something they had been seen her doing at the house. Tracy had washed her hands in full view of the police before they could do a gunshot residue test. When they questioned her, why did she do this? Tracy said that as a nurse, she was sensitive to the smell of blood. And since she had, in fact, touched her husband, her hands had the smell of blood all over them. So she rinsed her hands off with hot water. I say again, if you're a nurse all day long, 7 days a week, 365, why would this bother you for a loved one that's not a patient? And Tracy told authorities that she believes Scott wanted to harm himself because of the lengthy custody battle they were having over the children at the time, coupled with the fact that she was having an affair, he believed. Tracy said it was then that Scott flew into another rage, according to Tracy. Now, as I said before, I've done a lot of these cases, and a lot of wives that kill their husbands say that he harmed them or harmed himself or got violent. Tracy claimed that Scott brought out a baseball bat and demanded to know where her lover was, where Sean lived at, because he was going to go and bash his head in. He screamed at Tracy and then allegedly got physical with her. She said he grabbed her by the throat and threatened her with his balled up fist. It's a hard thing for somebody to go from non-violence to completely violent if that's the history. He said he was going to knock the shit out of her and she allegedly told him to do it if it would make him feel better. Now, a lot of these statements come right from a novel, a magazine, or television, but not reality. Unfortunately, everything that Tracy said after giving the correct spelling of her name was a flat-out lie. It would take 2 years of investigating before the police finally would find a solid piece of evidence tying Tracy to the murder. On August 11, 2005, Tracy was finally arrested for Scott's murder. The gun and its location were the biggest disputes in this case. Tracy said that she had found Scott with a gun in his hand on the bed. She never changed her story. One of the prosecutors said that a pillow was used to muffle the sound of the gunshot and that Tracy had used it to prevent any backsplatter from coming back at her or getting on the gun. Now, if you've ever thrown a rock into a pond of water, that water that comes back is like the backsplatter. Similar to when you shoot somebody, the blood spurts back. You see, when officers found Scott's body on the bed, his face was covered by a pillow, as if Scott shot himself through the pillow into his own head. Now, even as an expert marksman myself, I would have to say that this would be highly improbable to direct a straight shot while holding a weapon on the other side of a pillow while blindly shooting oneself. Improbable, impossible. You pretty much would miss yourself. Unless you had it directly at your forehead compressed to the pillow, but then you couldn't effectively take your own life. Detectives insisted that it was Tracy who placed the pillow over her husband's head before firing the shot that killed him. They also believed that Tracy used the pillow as a way to disassociate herself from him. You want to disconnect yourself from injuring somebody else. You just didn't want to see it, didn't want to believe that she did it. The forensic blood expert who looked over the police photos taken at the scene said he knew right away that this was not a suicide. One of the first officers on the scene said that he removed the gun, and when he did, the handle had been resting on Scott's left hand and the barrel on his right. Odd. He said there was no blood on Scott's hand, on the gun, and it didn't come to any contact with any of the blood on the bed. However, there was blood on the handle and a thick globule in the mechanism of the gun. So if the gun didn't get any kind of residue of his blood, the backsplatter, nowhere on the gun, but on the butt end of the gun, there was blood. How's that possible through a pillow? How's it possible? Now, Tracy would adamantly stick to her story that she never laid a finger on the gun and that she had never had an affair. Finally, 4 years after Scott's death, Tracy went on trial. On the stand, Tracy's lover, Sean, admitted that they had a mutual attraction, but that they never had sex. But no one believed this, and Tracy would be labeled as a cold-blooded murderer and a cheating wife. Now, this was most evident because 10 days after Scott was dead, Tracy and her lover Sean checked into a motel. Tracy said that it wasn't meant to be sexual now, and that they had only met there to talk, but things went further than they had planned. Wow. To meet in a hotel, two opposite genders, you don't think sex is going to come out of that. That particular night, the two lovebirds had a sexual encounter for what she said was the first time. What she said was the first time. They then had 2.5 year on and off again relationship. Not bad for a woman that should have, by all accounts, been traumatized by the death of her children's father at that particular time. The jury took 2 days to deliberate, and then they finally reached a verdict. They found Tracy guilty of first-degree murder. Tracy was then locked away in a holding cell to await her sentencing. This is where Tracy got her lucky break in life, probably the luckiest break that anybody on planet Earth could get. You see, by Texas law, the defense has the option of allowing the jurors to decide the sentence as well as the verdict. The sentence and the verdict. That's Texas law. Now, because of this, Tracy's lawyer had her take the stand in her defense before punishment was set. Tracy told the jury and anyone who would listen in that courtroom that she did not kill her husband and that she did not agree with that particular verdict that was set for her. But it was already set. Now, her two oldest sons also testified on her behalf. And you see this in a lot of cases. Children do love their mother more than their father, even though it was equal parenting, because people pity their mom. 2 days later, the jury came back with a verdict. The jury sentenced Tracy to no jail time. Tracy walked away from court a free woman after a brief lockup with 10 years probation. Now, that is clearly equal justice under law. Until we see you again next time, enjoy.